Hello, welcome to Retro Toy Princess. My name is Allison Troy, and today I have a special guest, which is Ken from Toy Kennections.
He's out of control!
You're joining me today because I wanted to actually talk to you about your toy line, Delta-17, specifically Death Sparrow, who I was lucky enough to get from you. Purchased from you, which is also quick. This is not a paid video or anything like this. I bought this because I wanted it, and Ken is cool and is talking to me. So get that out of the way for the officialness of it. And so since and also I am a Patreon of Ken, but that also has nothing to do with this. So full disclosure out there, Ken is a cool guy doing cool work, and Delta-17 is super cool. So with all of that said, I was hoping you would talk to me about Death Sparrow and sort of her creation and the history of her, all of the fun creative stuff.
Right. So, I mean, so back at the end of 2019, start of 2020 is when Steve Plett, who's kind of the primary owner of Delta-17, conceived of this idea. And along those lines, he would just go to Tim Hortons, which for those of you who are in the US, there's a coffee chain in Canada called Tim Hortons, and there was a 24-hour one. He would just go there and he would just sketch all night long. And these characters would just come out. And I did see some of the early sketches for Death Sparrow, but ultimately what we wanted was a strong female lead and then try to work her into the line somehow. You know, somebody who was as cool as the Baroness without being the Baroness. Now that's my own interpretation. Steve's never said those words to me, but when you look at the way she came along, it's kind of like she's that strong female of the line, and she's a bad guy, right? So the way it worked out is that he wanted somebody who was like old school Soviet Union, brought up that way, those beliefs, that system. And so when he came up with the faction called Retrograd, he's like, but we gotta do this from a mercenary angle. Like, they're going to be mercenaries. She's going to take disenfranchised and jaded GRU Spetsnaz operators and hire them, and then as a group they contract out to the dark shadows. Now, for those who have followed the line, they know that already, but what they may not know is that Death Sparrow did go through some color iterations before we landed on this particular color scheme. And the color scheme you see right now, the final two were the scheme you see now and a very similar one where instead of the black color, she's more of a gray, like a dark gray. And we look back when we looked at the sketches, we're like, wow, it looks good in both colors. What do we do? He might have even done one of the paint masters up in that color, if I recall correctly. And we eventually just went with the black color. But if I look back at some of the sketches, you know, we've changed the color of her hat. You know, I've seen it in brown. I've seen her boots in gray. Like, if we go with the black scheme, I've seen her boots in gray. They're now brown. So that's the kind of thing that just sort of evolves. You know, I mean, all of our characters went through different sketch and color pattern iterations. But she's one for me that stands out because just because it got down to the final two and we're just like, which one are we going to go with, right? Whereas with the other ones, it was very obvious which color scheme we were going to do, right?
Well, I personally really like the color scheme. I think it's obviously sort of black on the figure. With the art, it could be still sort of a dark gray. But that's also for me like toyetic. You know, because it was not uncommon even with sort of G.I. Joe, Star Wars, infamously, where the toys would get tinkered with a little bit to look like a better toy and not necessarily always be screen or comic book or even art accurate. So I like her a lot. Like, I was really happy when I opened it and got to look at it. And it also, interestingly enough, it gave me that sort of nostalgic feel, like when you would get a new G.I. Joe, just because the card art and the bubble, and also it's not G.I. Joe, so it's not a character I've gotten 2 or 3 times since the 80s. There was something really exciting about getting a character sort of that looks like vintage GI Joe ish,
Mm-hmm.
but isn't a character I know, because for me, a lot as a kid, part of the fun with sort of like Lady J, especially, she was sort of the first one I got. First GI Joe I got where it was specifically because I thought Lady J was cool, not like earlier Joes. I got Baroness and Scarlet, sort of to sub in for other toy lines that needed ladies and didn't have them.
Mm-hmm.
Lady J was my first GI Joe that I got as GI Joe, and even though she'd been on the cartoon a few times, that I had seen, so much of her backstory was up to what was on the file card and what I made up in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of figures for me as a child had all of this promise. There was all this untold story that I got to tell. And that was really cool because we have the file card on the back. Well, it's not quite a file card, but it serves the purpose. We've got her history, her name, her age. We've got what we need so that I can, with headcanon, I can make her whatever I want her to be.
Absolutely.
Not that
Absolutely.
not that I really get down on the ground and play like I would as a kid, but as adult collectors, I think we all have this headcanon that we make up to go with our characters based on how we pose
Oh yeah.
them.
I mean, when we developed the line, obviously, yes, we have our own unique story with it, as per the bios, as per the comics that are coming out. But there's a lot of people out there who have said they want to get Death Sparrow, they want to get the Thunder Battalion, and they either want to make them as part of the October Guard or enemies of the October Guard. And then there's characters from the Call Sign Longbow Kickstarter that Grindstone Toys is doing. They've got some Russian characters there as well. And those some people are going to want to merge the two together and make their own faction. So it's like, yeah, while we have a story, while they have a story, while GI Joe has a story, if people want to mishmash it all together and create their own headcanon, you know what, that's recreating a level of the play patterns that we had as kids, and I love it.
Well, I noticed that a lot with, I think, at least in the adult toy collector circles that I sort of move in, that everyone sort of does that, and especially with a lot of the indie toy lines, the small creators, like Steve and yourself, where it's like it's your love of these toys from our childhood that has you making these toy lines, and you're trying to bring that same. You've got to give somewhat of a story. You can't really send anything out as a blank slate in this day and age. There, even in the 80s, there had to be some little bit of story to sort of fire the imagination.
Yeah.
And I think these definitely have. For me, it has it. But
absolutely, for the most part. I mean, if you do like generic army builders, then you don't need as much of a story.
Yeah.
But if you are going to do like very unique characters, then it would make sense to add a story. Otherwise, it just looks a little, then it just makes it feel a bit more complete. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. Like I don't know. I'm just sitting here enjoying her. I think for me, what's also really interesting about it is a lot of the reviews I've watched so far, and there have been a few out, and a lot of sort of the talk I've heard ahead of time. Death Sparrow seems to be one of the more, I don't want to say popular, but more talked about. It's hard to say popular until people start getting them in hand. But like a lot of the buzz I've heard has been Death Sparrow.
And you'd be correct. We've heard more than a few people say she's the favorite.
Yeah.
Rooster is very popular. Shepherd is very popular. Leonidas is very popular. Shadow Dragon is very popular.
Well, I like my collection is primarily like female action figures, the ladies, as well as a few key, figures I had as a child. I will say, other than Kestrel, the other figure in Delta-17 I've kind of been thinking maybe is actually Shadow Dragon, just because he's very striking as a character. So who knows, maybe I will lighten my collection rules and pick up a Shadow Dragon, because he is really cool. And I could stick him on my Star Wars shelf and pretend he's a Sith Lord if I need to find a reason to justify it.
Yep. You might need to find one of the vintage collection lightsabers to throw onto him, but it would the funny thing is that actually kind of works.
Yeah.
He could be on the lineage of Sith Lords after, like, who was it that invented the rule of two. Was it Darth Bane? I think.
It was
Darth Bane. I think. I'm
it was
pretty
either
sure.
Darth Vane or Darth Plagueis. I think that's how you pronounce it. The
Plagueis?
one that
No.
Palpatine was blathering on and on about at that to Anakin and
Oh, it was definitely before Darth Plagueis. So I
um,
think it was Bane. I almost thought it was Darth
Probably.
Revan, but I think Revan left some holocrons that Bane used to make the rule of two. So I think
well,
officially it was Bane.
my memory, and it's been a long time since I've dipped my toe into that era of Star Wars expanded universe. Was
Yeah.
that Bane popped up in one of the
Mhm.
books or the comics, and then was moved into the game with when Revan came up, but I could be flipping that. I was never a big game person. You know, like I got Nintendo 64 specifically for Shadows of the Empire.
That's a good game.
That
I
was
still have never beaten the Giant Diagonal.
I beat it 2 or 3 times, and then I didn't play it anymore because I beat it. And then I got that Masters of Terrace, whatever the fighting game, and it was really bad. And then yeah, but the episode 1 video game was pretty good. So, anyway, I've opened Death Sparrow because I have been waiting. I wanted to do this with when we did this because. My next 2 questions. One, what is the future of this line? Because I would assume there are plans other than these set of figures, and that
Yep.
there will be more ladies. Hopefully.
Is that question 1?
Yeah, that's kind of like a twofer, but yeah, like what's the future?
Okay, so I mean, the reason Steve is not here with us right on this particular stream is because at the time of this recording, he's on a flight back from Maui to get back to his home in Manitoba.
No.
And when I was talking to him, I was like, "How's the vacation?" He's like, "I'm just at the beach sketching right now." So I'm like, "Okay, well, you're sketching for wave 2?" He's like, "I'm sketching for wave 2." We have a wave 1.5 figure that's pretty deep into development, but we're not ready to start tooling yet. But it's pretty deep into the sculpting development. We just got some stuff to go back and forth. So there's a future of the line. And sorry, did you also ask if there'd be more ladies in the line?
Yeah, because obviously that's sort of
Mhm.
the focus of most of my collection these days is just filling in the cool ladies of toys. So.
I'll just answer with one word. Yes.
Excellent. Very good. I'm
Yeah.
excited then.
The comic will be an ongoing run as well.
So the next question, which is when and where can people find these figures, and when can most people buy these?
Yeah, so I mean, Steve was hoping for middle of January, but I mean, if he's on a flight back right now,
Yeah.
and I mean, you might by the time you air this, we might be in mid-January.
Okay.
He's got to look at some fulfillment stuff because we were thinking about doing stuff just out of his warehouse area in Manitoba there, but that would require him filling out 3 pieces of paperwork for every single parcel that goes out, and you have to cross the border to the U.S. in order to take advantage of U.S. shipping.
Oh my God.
And then if he's doing that and he's doing nothing but filling out paperwork and packing boxes, guess what he's not doing? Drawing, designing, creating. Because between the two of us, he's the one who's full-time on the line, right?
Yeah.
I'm part-time. So, however, very good friend of ours, also another toy maker in the 118th space, has put us in contact with a fulfillment center in the US who are interested in carrying the product. And he's somebody we were going to send it to in the future anyway. So that's going to be worked on like pretty much as soon as he gets back.
Awesome.
And ideally, when you order from our Shopify site, the plan right now is for anything from US and international will come from the fulfillment center in the US. Anything from Canada, Steve and his sons will pack directly for Canadian orders. So hopefully end of January. Ideally, what we wanted to do, because you probably saw, I mean, just a week ago, at least at the time, a week ago from this recording, you saw a lot of reviews drop. You saw my unboxing. I called it a non-review because I can't review these impartially. You know what I mean? Just, you know, I was there for the development process, right? And help write some backstories.
Yeah.
We were actually going to drop this closer to early mid-January, closer to the date of the stuff coming out, but we're like, no, if we have to push back the release date, let's get some hype before the release date. And then one of the toy stores near Steve, he dropped them off there anyway, and they started selling them, and the word started getting out that way anyway from that brick and mortar store. Much love for Cobra Collectibles. I don't know them directly, but I've heard that the owner is a good guy. And yeah, so then word started getting out just in general, and then I said, okay, well, let's just move our review schedule up, right? And that's what Hooded Cobra Commander did his review, and that's when, you know, some of the other channels like Toy Habits. Yeah, I'm missing the names of about 5 or 6 channels right now. If I rattle them all off, I'll forget one.
At the time of this recording, I've watched your not reveal Toy Habits, and then I watched A Punk with Toys, Lawrence. So and and I was everything looked really cool, and I had mine. She arrived before that. I was like, I want to wait until Ken and I are doing this until I actually open her. So
I'm so glad you're happy with her.
Oh, I'm super happy. Like it's it's really cool. And I'm gonna do a bunch of there will be photography on Insta, which will be out before this episode is probably edited and put together, because Instagram is instant. So but no,
go for it.
I'm super into the idea, and I'm also really enjoying I think it was a wise man who was out of control who said we were in a golden age of a toy renaissance or some such. And it's stuff like this, stuff like AWOC, which I personally have not bought any AWOC yet because, you know, like they don't have any ladies yet. They're coming, but then I'll have some AWOC. But even with sort of the limitations I've put on my collecting at this point, it's really refreshing to start seeing sort of even indie toy makers who are putting sort of fresh ideas out there that pay homage to like the older ideas but are new, because to me, Masters of the Universe, part of what made that amazing as a kid was it was paying homage to sort of all the old sci-fi and fantasy stuff, all that Pulp Fiction, not the movie, but the actual pulp stuff, like with Conan and all of the sword and sorcery stuff, all those Frazetta paintings. G.I. Joe, one was paying homage to G.I. Joe, but also sort of like just all those old patriotic sort of World War II good guys versus bad guys stuff. Even Star Wars, Buck Rogers, all the old serials that George Lucas loved. So all these toy lines that we sort of are in this perennial, never-ending cycle of buying and rebuying. Actually, cats, gotta love them. Anyway,
Leave that in.
yeah, right. I'm gonna leave that in because my cats at this point are a character in on my channel. But anyway, and it was perfect timing. But yeah, so it's just all the stuff that we love that we keep bringing back, like actually have their own roots and stuff like Delta-17, where it's taking these old ideas, the old feelings that movies or whatever gave people, and they made these new things. And that's sort of what's happening here. I feel like you and Steve have taken what we loved about G.I. Joe, especially for me, the comic books written by Hama. Like, he wrote some amazing comic books that really expanded the world beyond the toys. And like, I feel like so far what I've seen of Delta-17 is drawing from some of the nostalgia of that, with at the same time being something new. So it's a really long-winded way of saying, like, I really love what I'm seeing with all these people like yourself who love toys, who are making toys and are giving us new things that have the feeling of nostalgia without actually being nostalgia. So
Fair enough. I mean,
yeah, so.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't have a whole lot to add to that other than to say thank you for being a fan of the line.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, like, that's one of the fun things about sort of being in the space I'm in, is getting to like talk to people like yourself, both on screen for this, and then, you know, like, obviously we've chatted and hung out on Oz, you know, some of Oz's live streams on Saturdays. It's just really cool to talk to people who like are creative and doing things and having fun and doing more than just acquiring old toys. So anyway, no offense to people who just want to acquire old toys, but it's you know, there should be more to the interaction, I think, than just buying a bunch of stuff. So
yeah,
you know,
I mean, I'm big on vintage, as you can tell. So
I would never have guessed that at all. There's nothing. I mean, same. Like, I've got all
Princess
my
of Power
vintage pop up on the wall. So I had to rescue those from the cats. I had the box out and they were trying to climb into it. And I'm like, I gotta get those up on the wall before cats lay on them. So you know how the cats are. So all right. I'm gonna check my notes really quick. And I think that's everything I had specifically for you. So before we sort of officially end this, Ken, do you have anything else to say to the people of YouTube that are watching this?
Not anything that's nothing, no big revelations other than the fact that those who have been very supportive, thank you so much for all that, just on behalf of myself and Steve, and the company overall. You know, I mean, those who have gotten their figures and have been spreading the word, much thanks. And we have a lot planned for the coming year and a bit. Reason I'm stuttering right now is because I'm just trying to think if I forgot anything, because I know this is one of the shorter conversations. Like, this isn't going to be an hour and a half of us talking on a TKO. So like, it's not one of those things. It's one of those say it now or forever hold your peace kind of things, because you know, with a TKO live stream, if I say something 20 minutes in and I forget something else, I can say it again 45 minutes in. We did get asked about resealable packaging. You know, we ended up not going with that, but that's going to be a question that's going to keep popping up, because some people are not going to want to open up their cards like this. Hopefully, like the cross sell on the back. I mean, one of the things that we did get asked by people before is why the characters are not very high ranking on Delta-17. Why is everybody a corporal? You know, even the most senior guy is a lieutenant. That's actually all part of the story. About their ranks. Right, and that's why Death Sparrow's rank actually makes sense, because she's not part of Delta-17. She's a captain rank, right? And she's 32 years old. Like, that one makes sense.
That actually is a question I technically forgot to ask. Technically, because I didn't write it down, but it occurred to me when I was reading the bio earlier. So she is basically a mercenary. So just if Delta-17 got enough money together, could they hire Death Sparrow for their stuff?
For reasons of not being, because they wouldn't want to hire corrupt mercenaries, right?
I got that,
It's
but I'm just saying, like, would
it's
she take the money? And if we don't know yet, that's cool too. Like maybe somebody.
if you pay her enough gold, I bet you she'll work for anybody. It's kind of it's kind of the simple answer. Whether, but I guess I read your question is would they even ask her? And it's like
Yeah, well, I don't. I mean,
that's not something that I mean unless there's a dramatic shift in the story that would result in them having to just outbid Shadow Dragon for her services. And that could be, you may have just pitched a story in our heads, and Steve's gonna watch this and he's gonna go, damn, and then 3 years later we're gonna circle back and we're gonna remember this conversation, right? So but she does go, yeah, she can be swayed, but she also has to respect you, and she respects Shadow Dragon.
Well,
That's
see,
the difference.
and I think that's appealing. I think to people, it's sort of like I think one of the reasons Boba Fett as a character was always enduring is there was still the implication of a code to what he was doing. Not like I'm not sure after I didn't finish Book of Boba Fett, so I can't say. But it always seems like, especially with the Mandalorian, there seems to be a really specific code, and I kind of like that in a character who's morally gray, but there's still a code. So anyway, it sort of occurred to me earlier, and I forgot to write it down to ask you.
Yeah. Let me know too if your Death Sparrow has problems raising one of its legs.
I checked that while we were sitting here, and I have not.
Okay, good.
Not having any issues.
Yeah, because mine did, other people's didn't. Gaz's did, and what Gaz did is he just switched out the T-hook for a smaller T-hook. Wilhelm, on one of his figures, not Death Sparrow, he had that issue, and he took the T-hook and he turned it around, and it helped. Like, it got more movement. He didn't get all the way 90 degrees hip movement, but he got more movement.
She seems fine.
And just before we went live, or just before we recorded tonight, I did the same thing as Wilhelm. I took the T-hook and I turned it backwards, and it gave more movement. It's not perfect, but it would not be identified as a QC issue. And I suspect that's what happened with the factory. I bet some of the T-hooks went in backwards.
Yeah.
I bet you anything, because if this was not caught during any of our test shot samples, and it's probably because we only got a small handful of samples, and then the factory goes in, they order T-hooks that are just a mil too thick. We don't notice because they go in a certain way, and then you put a bunch in backwards when you do a mass order. I'm half guessing because I haven't opened as many as Steve has. Yeah. But I have noticed, like, how come Kestrel and Death Sparrow are on the same buck, and my Kestrel, the legs go all the way up, and my Death Sparrow wasn't. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. Thank you for facilitating me getting her a little bit before the rest of the people. Because it's always it's always cool to be that kid on the playground. For me, it was always Zachary, freaking Zachary with his stupid Yoda. Anyway, I'm not bitter. It's only been since 1980. I'm a little bitter. So, Zachary, if you're watching this, you're still an ass. Anyway. Anyway, on that note, thank you again, Ken. I appreciate so much all of this and you joining me to talk about this. And I appreciate that you have made some cool toys. And
awesome.
With that, thank you. And for the people watching this, thank you for joining Ken and myself today. And this is Allison Troy, Rocho Toy Princess, and we are out.
Out of KEN-TROL!